Good morning, everyone. Nick, am I audible? Great. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Yes, thank you, Mr. Ngobo, for the response. So you'll notice that you are currently muted. So if you'd like to engage with us, please just engage in the chat. But welcome, everyone. Good morning. Can you please just type your name and the municipality or institution that you are from in the chat? Let's know who's in the room. Good morning. Msunduzi Municipality is in the room. Good morning. Mhlatuze is here. Morning, Adri. Good morning, Gwena from NERSA. Good morning, Kulegani. Greater Taung. Good morning, Tabiso. Good morning, Luisa from NERSA. NERSA is here. Naledi Municipality. Morning, Sharon. JB Marks, that's nice. Good morning, Esther. Setsutu. Morning, Riet. Morning, Delsile. Mukaka Municipality. Good morning. Good morning. Makwasi Hills. I always love that name. Morning, Abinos. JB Marks, Msundusi. Good morning, Bega. Morning. Theo Waterskloof. Good morning, Giselle. Alrighty. Keep the introductions coming. It is 9 o'clock and we are going to start. Hesekwa's in the building. Good morning, City of Joburg, Mulalo. Ingbayetheba, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Alrighty. I think maybe we'll just give it 2 more minutes before we kick off. Good morning, Smusisa from Overstrand. Morning, Daniel from Drakenstein. Alrighty. Okay. So we have about 41 people in the meeting. Few more seconds and then we can just kick off. I hope everyone is well. It's almost Friday. We're almost there, guys. We're almost there. Okay. See, 2 more people have joined. Can you please just type your name and your municipality or the institution that you are from in the chat? Just so we know who is in the room, who is with us, we'll acknowledge you. And like I mentioned earlier, you will notice that you are currently muted. So everyone except for the presenters are currently muted. But if you'd like to engage with us on anything, just please type it in the chat. Good morning, Vidri. Just type it in the chat. So you'll see next to the tab with the chat, there is Q&A. So as we go along in the session, if you have any questions, can you please just type it into that slot for the Q&A? My colleagues are online and they will be responding to your questions or alerting me or any of the other presenters to any of the questions that you might have. And then you can always raise your hand. We will make a provision for questions during some of the other presenters slots, and then we will unmute you and then you will come in. Feel free to react, send thumbs up, send hearts, laughing emojis throughout the session. Let's make it as interactive as possible, even though you will be muted. And then there is, if you just make your way towards the end, there is a polls button. So as we go along the session, we're going to be doing polls and vibe checks or Q&As, and it will pop up on your screen and you'll be able to answer it. But if by mistake you close it, then you can just navigate to polls and then it will appear. So as we go along the session, we will have polls. Please don't type your responses in the chat, type it within the poll. Yeah, I think I think that's all in terms of housekeeping. So we know how to navigate everything. Good morning, Tabang from Lisedi Municipality, and good morning, Pumla from NASA. Alrighty, so let us start. Good morning, Franz from City of Ekurhuleni. So for all the metros that are in the room today, I think I have a nice surprise for y'all towards the end. Whether you like it or not, we will get into that later, but it's nice to see you in the room, Franz. Good morning, Ronald from Down. Alrighty, let's kick off. So you've introduced yourselves in the chat. Let me introduce myself. So my name is Candice Kamule and I work with Sustainable Energy Africa. I am not alone. I have my colleagues with me. I have Nick Sims, who will also be giving a presentation later. I have one of my co-pilots who will be helping with the polls, Zibusiso Ndlovu, and I have our wonderful leadership, Miss Megan Houston Brown. So they will be interacting with you in the chat and in the Q&As as you give in your responses or would like to engage with us on anything. And then before we begin, I'd also like to just acknowledge our funders, GIZ, who has been providing support for the webinars that we've been having, the series of webinars that we've been having. So welcome to the Future Proofing Cost of Supply webinar. Yay! Alrighty, let me just share my screen so that we know what is on the agenda for today. Okay, just fixing my setup here. Just checking, Nick, is my presentation
Not yet.
visible? And in
So you share.
how will I, you say?
Share. It's clear. Okay, yes.
Really? Um,
You're not sharing it.
Let me just do this. Oh, I'm this side. Oh, okay, I see. Is it good? This is wild. So we're just having some technical issues. Okay, I'm just going to reshare my screen. Alrighty, can we see my screen now? Okay, that is great. So once again, welcome to the Future Proofing Cost of Supply Studies webinar. So on the agenda today, we've done our welcome, our housekeeping and framing of the day. So we're going to begin with a presentation. I will be giving that presentation on behalf of C, and it will just be an overview of the legal and regulatory framework that governs cost of supply. We're going to touch on unbundling and what does a future-ready cost of supply study look like. And then we're going to be having an input from my colleague, Nick Sims, on standard cost of supply steps in the new world or the unbundled industry. And then we have the regulator in the room. We're going to have an input from Ms. Tabisa Nkopo, and she will also be delving into what the expectations are from the regulator in terms of a future-proof cost of supply study. And then we're going to have a comfort break. We know that people might want to just, stretch their legs, grab a cup of coffee. So we factored that into the outline. So we will give you 10 minutes to just go and have a break, and then you can come back into the session re-energized and ready to move on. And then we're going to be looking at wheeling and embedded generation. So how do we incorporate wheeling and embedded generation into our cost of supply studies? And Nick will be giving us a deep dive in that session. And then we might touch on ring fencing towards the end of the session. So remember I said if you are a metro and you're in the room, I have a surprise for you. That's it there. We may allocate time towards the end there. So if you are a metro and you're part of the metro trading services or you have done ring fencing, we would like to hear from you there. And then towards the end, we're just going to open the floor for any questions and other questions and answers and any other inputs that we might want to pick up. And then throughout, we're going to be having a webinar. So we will actually kick off with survey, sorry. We're going to kick off with a survey. So just to gauge, we need to know the before and after, just so we know whether our webinar is impactful or not, whether you're gaining anything from it or not. And then throughout, we're going to be having polls, but I want to call them a vibe check. So we're going to be gauging, we're going to check and see what's the level, where's everybody at, what do we have, what do we not have, and what support do we need. So I think, yeah, I think we're ready to kick off. Let's see. And yeah, I think we are right on time. So before we begin, as I mentioned, we're going to do the pre-webinar survey. So I'm just going to ask my co-pilot, my colleague Zibu, can you please just launch the pre-webinar survey? So it's going to appear on your screens, colleagues. Can you please just respond to the questions in the polls? As I mentioned, you do not type the responses in the chat, type them in within the poll. And then if you mistakenly close it, just navigate to the polls tab, click on it, and then from there you will be able to see the questions on the poll and respond to them. So I think the first question on the poll is, how are you feeling today? We want to know, we're checking. Am I giving you enough energy for Friday? Is the poll appearing, Nick? I can't see, unfortunately. Okay. I'm not sure which question we're on. Are we on the first question or the second one? I need to find a way to see what the paper is. I will fix it later though. Okay. Zibu, we can just have a side chat if you think we're ready to close the poll because I didn't win with my second screen, so I can't see the poll. It didn't pop up on my side. Okay. So right now we are answering the questions in the poll. I believe there's only 4 questions, only 4 questions. Hope responses are coming in.
36.
We have 36 out of 87. No, let's get to 40. We need just 4 more people to answer the pre-webinar survey. We're just doing a before and after. We need to know what the status quo is. And then at the end of the webinar, we're going to see if circumstances have changed or improved. Are we still on 36 responses, Nick? 40, yeah, that's great, but keep them coming, keep them coming. Should we wait maybe 2 more people before we close the poll? I think maybe I'll continue with my presentation in the meantime. Alrighty, so the future of the electricity distribution grid. So now you may be wondering, what is a little alien doing in a future-proofing cost of supply study webinar? But I just want us to do a little imaginative exercise here. Let's pretend that we're all aboard his spacecraft and we're going with him, we're charting through these unfamiliar territories. What is this territory, you ask? It's the South African electricity distribution grid as we know it. But now there's lots of new things that are coming at us. We're seeing use of system charges, we're seeing wheeling, we're seeing reforms, we're seeing market operationalization. There's a lot going on. And so now the question becomes, are our municipalities ready for the journey? Because we don't want to leave any of them behind. And the destination that we're aiming for here is not just another cost of supply study. We've all submitted studies before. We all know how it works. But now the destination that we want to get to is a future-proof cost of supply study. So today, we're going to take this journey together. So my job in my overview presentation is to just paint the picture for you. Where are we? What does the law say? What's changing in the law? and how does it affect our cost of supply studies? And how do we get to a cost of supply study that is not only defensible, but can help municipalities to navigate this ever-changing landscape that is the distribution sector? Okay, so let's go. Let's begin the journey. But also, I need to narrow my scope. So the discussion for today, we're not going to touch on everything, but if there is something that you'd like to bring up, you can type it in the chat and we can pick it up later. But for today, the main focus will be probably three main areas. We want to look at unbundling tariffs and cost-reflective tariffs. We want to touch on inputting embedded generation and wheeling into your cost of supply study, so explaining the importance of that. And then lastly, we're going to touch on ring fencing. So I hope that that is clear. We're not covering everything. Okay, so what are we navigating on the South African landscape? What is happening in the future of the electricity distribution? We all know that the era has been amended, and with that amendment came in a lot of new players. A lot of new players were introduced into the space. We know that it came with the unbundling of ESCOM, the unbundling of tariffs, and many other things, including the promotion of the adoption of renewable energy. We know that electricity prices will continue to hike, and as a result, customers are going to feel the pinch. So we can continue to expect resistance. But now, because cost of supply studies are public facing and they're out there for scrutiny, we can expect resistance not only from the customers, but from practitioners of the law. This is why we need to be able to defend the tariffs that we are proposing. And then also the renewable energy that we're talking about, in the South African context, we know that it is solar. So the NCCSA recently did a study and they're saying that embedded generation has surpassed 8 gigawatts. And that's a lot. We know that that's not just households, that's shopping malls, that's manufacturing plants, it's big business and it's municipalities' biggest customers. So we know that there's going to continue to be an uptake in solar. So municipalities need to continue to be ready to tackle some of these pending challenges. So let's look at what the law says. What are some of the legal and regulatory framework that governs cost of supply studies? So I'm not going to unpack everything. I'll just touch on the key points. We know that the two sector departments that lay the foundation for the law is Treasury and the Department of Electricity and Energy. And from that, NERSA gives us frameworks, and the one that pertains to us, or that's most important to us, is the cost of supply study framework and the third-party wheeling rules. We know that the ERA is the one that has initiated or set the ball in motion in terms of the reforms in the sector. It has introduced competition and a lot of new players in the space. And we're also waiting with bated breath as a sector for the revised electricity pricing policy, which funnily enough or excitingly enough comes out tomorrow. It will be published tomorrow for comment. It will be out for comment tomorrow, the 21st of August. So we are waiting for that as a sector. So what impact does this have on us? The ERA has established an open market platform that will allow for competitive electricity trading. So for those of you that, while the few municipalities that were part of the cost of supply champions workshop, there's about 12 municipalities or so, we did an exercise and we asked the question, what would you want to come out of a cost of supply regime? And one thing that came out there was municipalities saying that the ESCOM bulk purchase price should be looked into because it will continue to be one of the biggest cost drivers for municipalities. And the establishment of the open market platform will potentially reduce that. So we know that, and that's great. We also know that the ERA says that municipalities cannot charge tariffs that have not been approved by NERSA. We know that it's enabling wheeling. We know that it's acknowledging that municipalities must remain financially sustainable. So they must prepare for the changing landscape in the sector. And then the third-party wheeling rules from NERSA are further driving home the point that municipalities need to have cost-reflective and unbundled tariffs. Okay, cool. So now that we know all of this, what is on the horizon? We already know about embedded generation and wheeling, and we're sort of familiar with it. But as we go along today in the session, Nick is going to be unpacking that even more. And as we've mentioned, the electricity pricing policy, the revised one, is out for public comment tomorrow. So we should all look out for that and see what the effect will be on the sector. And also, I think I just want to point out that we are in a transitionary period, and until the market is established, when it is established, things will look different. But until then, we need to be agile and work up with what we have. Okay, so now that we've laid the foundation of what's in the law, what's changing, how does it affect us, now we need to define what a future ready cost of supply study looks like. So with NASA's near universal 25-26 cost compliance now achieved, the bar has shifted from do you have a cost of supply study to is your cost of supply study defensible under scrutiny? So what are we saying here? Municipalities, well, almost all municipalities, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 this year, submitted their cost of supply study. So we know what it looks like. We know it must accompany our tariff application to NERSA. That has been sorted. But now the problem is, can we defend the tariffs that we are proposing? So how do we do that? What does a future ready cost tool look like? So our submission comprises of a cost of supply study, an asset register, which my colleague Zibu wonderfully explained in last week's webinar. If you didn't participate, please go to our YouTube channel and listen to that one. And then also public consultation. It's very important. And a good cost of supply study is made up of a good cost of supply study tool that is compliant with the cost of supply framework. It has a tariff impact study and performance management. What do we mean by these things? When we say a tariff impact study, we're saying that municipalities, you need to look at how the new revenue requirement and the tariffs that you have designed, what impact will they have on your customer? And by performance management, we're saying your cost of supply should not be just a yearly tick box exercise. We need to start checking whether we are meeting the benchmarks that NERSA has set. And then the tool that we recommend municipalities, so that we use rather, the one that was developed in partnership with Ricardo, that tool already has a lot of these functions built into it. It makes provision for your asset register input. It makes provision for your tariff impact study, your tariff schedule, your rate design. It makes provision for your non-Eskom purchase inputs. So integrating your wheeling and embedded generation into the tool. And as I mentioned, Nick will go into that in his session. And then also, as municipalities, we need to start understanding our cost allocation. So what we're saying here is we're no longer just going to do a simple cost of supply study and just submit it. We need to explore, like that little alien in the beginning, we need to explore other aspects of the tool and really understand our study so we can defend them. So we need to understand how to allocate costs to either the wires or the retail across the different customer categories. And then lastly, as I mentioned, results benchmarking, looking at our allowable losses, our allowable expense increases. Are they within or above the range that NERSA has set? And if they're above, what adjustments do we need to start making as a municipality? And then, as we mentioned, the ERA states that you cannot charge tariffs that have not been approved by NERSA, but also as a municipality, we cannot develop tariffs if we do not have policies upon which to base them. So what does this mean? It's sending us back to the basics. We're starting from scratch. Do you have an embedded generation framework or policy in place? Do you have a wheeling policy in place? And then also, if we're going to be including embedded generation in our cost of supply studies, do we know where our embedded generation systems are installed? Do we know the capacity? Do we know the size of them? Do we know if they're exporting to the grid and how much? Do we have some sort of method to track them? Do you see where I'm going with this? Are we on the SSEG application platform? Very important. Alrighty, so some of the other strategies for a defensible cost of supply study, as we mentioned, is unbundling your costs. So we need to know what are our network related costs and what are our energy related costs. So our wires and retail. And Nick will unpack this in detail, but I'm introducing this to segment into this as well. We also need to unbundle our charges. What are some of the reasons why it's important to unbundle our charges? The first one is that wheeling, which we need to be prepared for, it requires unbundled charges. So Our network use and energy supply must be separately priced so that the wires charge applies regardless of who the energy is bought from. The second part is that it provides regulatory defensibility. It's easier to defend a charge that is unbundled rather than a blended one. The third one is revenue stability under declining volumes. That one is a bit obvious. And then the other reason is that ESCOM is already moving in this direction. So ESCOM is also they have a generation capacity charge and they have service and administration charges. So they are recovering the fixed cost through these charges. And the generation capacity charge, in fact, I think they are proposing that it goes up from 20% to 30%. And then they're also pushing for the admin and service charges to go up by up to 66%. So municipalities need to also just follow suit. And then another good reason is for those municipalities that are being encouraged to go into distribution agency agreements or that are looking to outsource their retail, it gives you a stronger position. It'll help you to protect your municipal revenue, and your assets will be properly valued because it becomes difficult to try and renegotiate the terms once you're already in it. And then also another important part, we need to comply with the timelines. We cannot start doing our cost supply studies in March. We need to start updating our tools from now. Sustainable Energy Africa does have a YouTube playlist that will take you step by step through each of the sheets on how to populate the tool. We need to do our tariff impact studies, and also we need to make time for our customer participation or customer engagements. That's very, very, very important. And we also need to give NERSA enough time to go through their own internal processes because there was an incident where, because now everything has been made bare, there was an incident where the court ruled in favor of, well, not in favor of, but they pointed out that there was a study that was submitted one day and then NERSA approved it the following day. So it doesn't look good for us as a sector. So we need to start working on this. And I think with that, I am concluding my presentation. So yeah, I think that's it. But now we are going to be having a young vibe check, as I mentioned. So this is me just checking with you. Are we still alive in the room? So I'm going to ask or to launch rather the second set of questions. So here we are doing, we're gauging where is everybody at with some of the strategies that we've mentioned. Do you have some of the embedded generation? Do you have an embedded generation policy? Do you have a tariff? I believe those are the questions, Zivu. So we're doing a vibe check, a status quo check. I'm not sure if there were any questions in the chat, but I will look at them in a minute. So this is now before I hand over to my colleague. I think for this, I'm going to try and check. Let me check. Nick, has the poll been launched?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we have 104 people in the room. Welcome to those that joined us along the way. Are the responses coming in? So we're currently doing a vibe check. Can you please answer the questions there? Oh, and I believe the questions say you must put your municipality's name. We're naming and shaming here. How many responses do we have so far? 5. No, guys, can we please answer the questions in the poll? Oh, Zibu, can you please flight? It's going to be the first 4 questions. So we've done the pre-webinar survey, and then now we are doing the 4 questions for the vibe check. So it's the first 4 questions that we have there. So can you please launch those 4? And then we'll launch the remaining 4 after Nick's presentation. How many responses do we have now? 14 responses. Thank you to the 9 people that have also responded. Okay. I think we have like 1 more minute for the poll before I hand over to my colleague, Nick. So Nick has a great presentation for us. So I hope we will be engaged. Nick is going to be discussing how to split the cost between your wires and your retail. How many responses do we have now? 40.
14.
14, 1, 4 already. Okay, I think that is fine. Nick, I'm going to hand over to you for your presentation. Thank you, everyone. Mm.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Can I just get a confirmation that my screen is sharing correctly and all of that? Good. I see a thumbs up. I see many thumbs up. So thank you for that. Right. So just to get started, I'd like to say, oh, here we go. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. It's hold on 1 second. I just need to mute my colleague here. Right, because if there's anything worse than having to listen to me, it's me having to listen to me talking to you. All right. So, as I mentioned, yeah, good to be here and good to talk about quite an important and relevant part of the cost of supply family at the moment, and that's the going around the issue of use of system charges, embedded generation, export tariffs, and a lot of these things are concepts that we understand, but the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts are sometimes a bit unclear. But in order to get down into that level of granularity, it's worth repeating the cost of supply process. So this first section, I'm just going to go over some things that most of you will know and be familiar with, but it does lay the groundwork for what we're going to be talking about a little bit later. And I think as we go along, it's worth repeating all of these cost of supply processes and making sure that it's second nature for us, because as the scrutiny on cost of supply studies grows and the industry modernizes, especially with the electricity market coming down the road in the next few years, we need to make sure that these sorts of things are very familiar and that we aren't learning them for the first time when everything's up and running. So some of you will have seen this slide before, but as I said, it's worth repeating. What is a cost of supply study? And a cost of supply study is basically a way of examining the true costs that the municipality incurs to supply electricity to different customer groups. And quite a few things go into a cost study. And as you can see, it's financial and technical information. Those are things like your income statement and your asset register, your ESCOM bills and purchases from non-ESCOM suppliers, tariff information, so what ESCOM charges you and what you charge your own customers, and then commercial information as well, so your customer category data, your electricity sales, and your technical information as well, so things like loss factors and thanks, Candice. things like loss factors and load factors and all of that. Once that all goes into the cost of supply study, it then tells you what your revenue requirement is. And that revenue requirement is what you use to design your tariffs. The other thing that a cost of supply study does very well is it helps you uncover your cost drivers. The average person on the street assumes that a unit of electricity is what you buy and what you pay for. But once you do a cost of supply study, you'll understand that energy does play a role, so the kilowatt hours that we consume, but there's other factors like demand. So the rate of electricity use affects the network, and you need to be able to supply electricity at peak demand. And that requires different investments to supplying at off-peak. Then there's also customer-related costs, those things like reading meters, billing, salaries, that sort of thing, that they don't go away when everybody has solar panels on their roofs. So these are the cost drivers that we need to think about. So basically, the cost of supply process isn't as complicated as it may seem. It goes through the data inputs like we discussed, and then that calculates the required revenue that you need to run your electricity business. After that, there's cost classification and cost allocation. This slices and dices your revenue requirement according to your different customer categories and the energy and demand and customer related costs, as well as something that we're going to talk about a lot in this section here is your wires and your retail related costs. Once that's been done, you're then able to design your tariffs. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's the wires and the retail side of the business. The wires side of the business, and I'm using this terminology because that's how it is in the cost of supply tool, but it's essentially your network. It's your network infrastructure and the capital that you use to manage that network. So it's all your capex that you use to build your infrastructure and maintain it. It's your depreciation. So you'll obviously depreciate your assets over their useful life, and hopefully not too much longer past their useful life. Then there's network repairs and maintenance, and then some OPEX also falls into your wires business area. On the other side is your retail business area, and the biggest part of it by a long way is your wholesale bulk electricity purchases. So this is what you buy from Eskom, and that makes up most of the retail expenses. But there are other things as well. So if you buy energy from non-Eskom sources, you'll see that featuring there as well. And then things like metering, billing, vending, a lot of those customer related costs that we mentioned on the previous slide. And then marketing and customer related OPEX as well. Those are all part of the retail business. And this is quite an important slide to try and burn into your minds the difference between what makes part of the wires business area and the retail business area, because that's what we're going to be speaking about a lot today. And we'll revisit this. So if it doesn't make sense straight away, we'll come back to it. So now this is a very busy slide, but it makes the point that a lot of things go into splitting the wires and the retail. So for each customer category, and you can see there's a couple, there's wires costs and retail costs. And you'll see here again, there's capex and return, depreciation, some of the things we mentioned. There's also the cost of losses. Some of that will also feature on the network side. And part of all of these different costs over here, there's Rand per kVA, Rand per kilowatt hour, and Rand per customer costs. So a depreciation isn't just one type of cost. It can be all three. So that's what we need to split up in the cost of supply model. There are also certain instances where things are split by seasonal and time of use factors as well. So something that like the losses will be higher in the high season at peak time than it will be in the low season at off peak time. So the cost of supply model does all of this sort of calculation in the background. On the retail side, you can see the power purchases again is the big one. There's also some losses that are factored in on this side. This is the nicer euphemism of non-technical losses. And then there's also other energy purchases and the other OPEX. So again, these are also all split by Rand per kVA, Rand per kilowatt hour, and Rand per customer. And then also there's a seasonal and a time of use element to it as well. So this is more of just an illustration. You don't have to worry about all of this, but just to highlight the fact that per customer category, there's wires and retail costs that are split across multiple categories and multiple cost drivers. And all of these things factor in to designing your tariffs. So when I block out the retail and I look at just the wire side, this is the sort of thing that we're considering when we are going to be doing, say, a wheeling use of system charge. When you are no longer buying the electricity, or in the case of an embedded generator, if they are exporting onto the grid, a lot of that retail side falls away and we focus mainly on the network costs. And you can see that the network costs are also just not a Rand per kilowatt hour. So this whole net concept of retail and network is something that we need to bed down, and we're going to be repeating this quite a bit throughout the day so that we can really get comfortable with the concept. So this is just the top contour of how the cost of supply process works with respect to the wires and the retail splits. And later on, we're going to go into a deeper dive session on how this relates to the cost of supply tool and how you can actually work with it in the tool. And this session I've just had now is just to give you the roadmap of how it kind of works. So try and remember these concepts, but we're going to revisit them again in a little bit. So thank you for the top contour. I'm going to hand over back to Candice, and yeah, I will be back with you shortly.
Thank you so much, Nick, for the presentation.
While my colleagues are they're just sorting out the PowerPoint, I will encourage everyone to share their experience with us in the chat and as well in the Q&A. If what your municipality is doing about these wires and network related costs and how you are dealing with that, or if you're not dealing with it, there's no shame in it. It can be quite confusing. So we just want to get a feel for the municipal experience and what strategies you're using to try and figure out this difficult journey.
No, the presentation was great indeed. He was telling us this morning it's proper. I really like that diagram. I think it explains really well. Just checking, am I audible? Can I have thumbs up if you can hear me, everyone? Alrighty, thank you, thank you, thank you. And also, I was reviewing the polls. It's looking great. So, how are we feeling today? 40% said great, 40% said good, and 16 said just okay. Some said no, so not so good. I hope we are solving at least some of your problems. And then there was a second question. Do you know how to separate wires and retail costs? 58% said no, and you were in the right room. Nick is about to help with that. And then 23% said yes, and 19 said vaguely. Okay, that's good. And then, do you know how to integrate wheeling into your cost of supply studies? 81% said no. Again, you are in the right room today. So that's great. And then the second vibe check that we had, we asked, write your Munich name if your Munich has an approved embedded generation tariff. 19 people responded. It's Emalahleni, Naledi, Wittenberg, Mafube, Msunduzi, Setsutu, Overstrand, Karreeburg, Abakulusi, Mukaka, City of Cape Town, Ulundi, City of Ekurhuleni, Mogale City, and I think it's Namakwa, I think. So that's great. Alrighty. So now we're going to be moving on to another vibe check. So Zibu, can you please just launch the next poll and then I will also just launch the other one. Okay, so we're doing another vibe check. We're doing another vibe check. Alrighty. So it has popped up now. The question is, if you do not have an EG feed-in tariff, what are the reasons or hurdles you are facing? So only 19 people said they have, and we have about 108 people in the room. I'm not sure how many municipalities are represented, but if you do not have an embedded generation feed-in tariff, what other reasons or hurdles you are facing? Please just feel free to type your response in there before we hand over to the regulator. Okay. We have one response so far. So if you don't have an embedded generation feed-in tariff or export tariff, what are the reasons or hurdles you are facing? Why don't you have an embedded generation tariff? Only one person has responded. Does that mean there's only 20 municipalities in the room? This one, you don't have to write your municipality's name. Don't worry, we're not going to name and shame you. If you do not have an embedded generation feed-in tariff, what are the reasons or hurdles you are facing? Alrighty, I think we can close this one. We can move on to the next vibe check. Zivu, thank you. Oh, okay, four responses on the previous one. That's great. Alrighty. So some of the reasons, a service provider, possible rejection, confusing calculation, okay? NERSA's rejecting. Okay, so moving on to the next vibe check. Write your municipality name if your Munich has an online platform for embedded generation applications. So do you have an online platform, either of your own or you're using the SSEG online application platform? Umhlatuze, that's great. Two responses so far. Overstrand. Okay, it's going to be the same, probably. Okay, no, I mustn't assume. Umhlatuze, Situtu, Wittenberg, Overstrand. Who else has an online platform or is on the SSEG platform? We have five responses of the 19 people. Emalahleni, that's great. So it's probably going to be the same, I think. Amahlati, City of Cape Town, Ekurhuleni, that's great. Alrighty. Okay, I think we can have our own website. Okay, that's great. Ekurhuleni, KSD, lovely. Okay, I think we can close this one and launch the next one. Thank you, Zibu. 10 responses. Okay, that was great. The next one, if you do not have an online platform for embedded generation, what are the reasons or hurdles you are facing? If you do not have an online platform for embedded generation, what are the reasons or hurdles you are facing? Someone said none. Everything is going well. We love it for you. If you do not have an online platform, someone says siyabonga. Not sure what they mean by that. Assistance, okay. I need assistance. That's great. 10 responses on the previous poll. We have only 4 here. Okay, we have 2 minutes left before we hand over to the regulator. Zibo, we can move on to the next poll. Thank you. The next vibe check. What is the vibe? What's the level? Thank you, Zibo. Okay, so write your Munich name if your municipality has an approved wheeling framework. So now we want to know who is prepared for wheeling, who has a wheeling framework, who has a wheeling policy. Overstrand municipality, that's great. Overstrand is winning. Embedded generation, they are there, wheeling, they are there. Umhlatsuze as well. Ekuruleni, Lipalale, hi. Who has an approved wheeling framework? We have 5 responses so far. City of Cape Town, of course, Msunduzi, that's great. So we have 7 municipalities in the room that have wheeling frameworks. Okay, I'm going to assume that that is all. Thank you so much, Sibu. I'm going to now hand over. Let me just check, is she in the room? So someone from the regulator. Good morning, Miss Ngobo. I see you're here. Okay, we're going to hand over to the regulator, and she's going to be providing a regulatory perspective on future-proofing cost of supply studies. The poll has been closed. Thank you so much, Sibu. I'll hand over to you, Ms. Ngobo. You can share your screen. Just introduce yourself, maybe. Let's see your lovely self. Introduce yourself before you jump into your presentation.
Thank you, Candace. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabisang Popo from NERSA, and I'll be taking you through the presentation. The purpose of it is to inform the stakeholders, which are municipalities in this case, on the review of the COS framework, and then set out the legal and policy basis for the review and invite stakeholders in participation in the consultation process that is ahead, because currently NERSA is reviewing the COS framework. And then as we are aware that the error has been amended to replace the cost plus and a reasonable margin to a return that must be proportionate to the risk of that activity. In this case, I will request Abase just to share the presentation for us. But other than that, some of the issues have been already spoken to by Candice and Nick with regards to the legal terminology and the requirements that entail this review of this COS framework. I don't know whether Abase is struggling a bit with the sharing of the document.
Tabisa, we've just made Avase a presenter, so I think he'll be able to share his presentation now.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Anase. As I indicated that the purpose of this engagement is to inform municipalities and other stakeholders of the NERSA's review of the cost of supply framework and outline the legacy and policy basis to invite participation. Can go to the next slide, Anase. And then what informs this is the applicable legal framework that is in front of us. As we are aware that Parliament has replaced the cost plus reasonable margin. So now what we're going to concentrate on is the full cost recovery of an efficient licensee. And then the risk will be adjusted to the return. So meaning that any reasonable return must be proportionate to the risk of the licensee's activities instead of a generic margin like we were doing. Because currently we had two methodologies, which was the cost plus methodology and the rate of return methodology in the current framework. But now with the review, we're going to do away with the cost plus methodology and only concentrate on the rate of return, and that requires the assets of the municipalities. Next slide, please. And then it's section 15 that governs us. It says that section 15 of the ERA enable an efficient licensee to recover the full cost of all the licensed activities and allow a reasonable return commensurate with the risk. And then we've got the EPP, as Candice indicated, that it will be gazetted tomorrow. Then it states that NERSA must guide COS development and align tariff structures and levels with updated COS studies and the associated revenue requirement. So every COS approval must have an efficient cost, license activity risk, and tariff design to the current evidence of the cost incurred by the municipality. Next slide, Abase. What the shift is intended to achieve. We've got the market reform. So we are unbundling electricity services whereby we need to separate the cost drivers that show the wires and the retail side. Nick has already touched on this. And then the tariff design, which should reflect cost structures that are cost reflective. And then align tariff structures up to the cost of supply study and the services delivered by that particular municipality. And then also look into the sustainability of the municipality, which also talks to the productive infrastructure investment, and then link this return to the assets plus the risk of that, and then reward an efficient investment through a risk-adjusted return on the asset base. And then we also consider the customer protection. This is based on evidence-based regulation, whereby we only allow efficiently cost recovery in order to support, to protect the customers from paying for costs that are not efficient. Next slide, Abase. So as Nick indicated, currently with the cost of supply study, we've seen that there is a shift from to distribution, wires, and retail. He had already presented this slide as well. So tariff methodologies provide greater transparency now between the distributed wires and the retail of energy services. This is due to the unbundling of tariffs that facilitated the electricity market reform, because as we saw in the presentation of Nick's presentation, wires talk to the network access. Now we've got fixed charges that need to talk to that, and then connection charges, and then we've got capacity charges, generation capacity charges, and then all the other costs and that indicate the unbundling on the wires. And then when we look at the retail side, we've got those bulk purchases, which now there's introduction of even base fixed charges like basic charges for those energy charges under the bulk under retail. And then we also have billing and metering services that talk to the admin staff. And then that's also covered through the fixed charges of the municipalities. Next slide. And then as we are currently busy with the review of the COS framework, now, as I indicated earlier, now the framework has to only align to the rate of return methodology. Currently, we are at the initiation stage whereby NERSA is reviewing the current framework that we have. And then around August, September, which is what is happening now, SIA and SALGA provisional, even though they're on the virtual webinars, that's the engagement of stakeholders on this review. And then in around September, October, NERSA is going to run workshops on the deforms, and in those deforms workshops, we're going to integrate the review of the COS framework. And then around October, November, we're going to do consultation on this reviewed framework. And then we anticipate that around December, we'll have an approved framework, which will be communicated to all municipalities. But now what we envisage that we might have, as much as the framework will be approved around December, we want to engage municipalities now so that they are aware of what needs to change, so that we don't wait for the last minute whereby they need to submit their applications and then they are not in line with the framework. So it is crucial that municipalities also attend these webinars so that they are aware of what needs to be done, because we also need to have training on how to move from the cost plus methodology to the rate of return, considering that SIA has already has a model that can assist municipalities. So I plead with municipalities that they should continue attending these webinars. And then our last slide, Abase. And then the activities that need to converge by December, as I indicated, that will be doing our consultation process. So from the municipality side, they need to ensure that they have asset registers that are regularly updated and maintained to support compliance with the ROR methodology, upgrade and enhance their billing systems to support effective tariff unbundling, and then attend webinars, as I indicated, workshops on development of COS studies aligned to the ROR methodology. We also need robust participation in the NERSA's consultation process, because municipalities are no longer interested in that. But hopefully this year, we hope that everyone will engage during the consultation process. And then lastly, they need to submit their COS studies that will be aligned with the ROR methodology. I will hand over to Abase on the HOD, on the deform workshop and the willing. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Kopo, and also thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of the changes to the 25-26 financial deforms, is changes in terms of D2, statement of financial information. In terms of the changes, there's a new data items or variables, which are willing or generator use of system. The credit webs from ESCOM, and also embedded generation, net billing credits, and also credit paid to willing customers. And also we make changes in terms of market information, in terms of the embedded generation exported into the license grid, and also willing energy, and also no changes on these other tabs: settlement of financial position, D4 and D7. Let me go to the next slide. Sorry, that's a second, Chair. Let me just stop sharing for a second. Just want to go to the next slide. Sorry, let me go to the next slide. In terms of D8, in terms of quality, there's a new data which including the NRS 04 to 205 requirements. That's what we'll do. And also there are changes in terms of reliability indices.
Sorry, I would say, sorry to interrupt you. I don't think you're sharing your screen. I don't know if you
Okay, no,
are.
my apologies. Let me share again.
No problem. I'll let you know when we can see them.
Okay. Let me put it on the screen mode. Okay.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah. We already indicated that we gonna we are making changes in terms of D8 quality of service, and also we are making changes in terms of reliability indices to cover the NRS 048 requirements on different indices like SIED and SAIF across licenses in South Africa, electricity sector, including load shedding. And there's no changes on the D5 and D6. Let me go to the next slide. And going to the next slide, these are the indicative workshops. This financial year, we'll be undertaking a workshop in the D-forms so that we can be able to assist and also, licensing in different provinces. This is the indicative workshop days, which our team will be visiting various municipalities and provinces so that we can be able to assist the municipalities so that we can ensure that we achieve the October deadline. That's all from my side, Chair. That's what that's our story. And thanks very much.
Thank you so much to Nersa for the presentation. Thank you, Tabisa, and thank you very much to Abase. I'm seeing a question in the comments from Corley, and they're asking, will there not be a roadshow in the Western Cape or Gauteng? All right, so colleagues, can you please just share any questions that you have for Nersa in the Q&A bar, and Nersa will answer them when we come back from the break. So we are taking a comfort break, and let me just share the screen. We are going to be taking a 15-minute comfort break, but yes, just to appreciate Nelsa for the presentation. And as they mentioned, it is encouraged for municipal colleagues to be attending these webinars so that you can continue to have your ear to the ground to what is happening. And we appreciate them providing clarity on some of the issues on the rate of return and the changes that have been made to the financial and non-financial defaults. But for now, we're going to be taking a 15-minute comfort break. So it is 8 minutes past 10. Let's say we're going to be coming back at 10:25. So at 10:25, we will return, and then Nick is going to be giving us a presentation on how to incorporate wheeling and embedded generation into the cost of supply study tool. So if you have any questions, not just for the regulator, for maybe Nick or any of the other presentations that have been had so far, just type them in the Q&A bar, and then when we come back from the comfort break, we will start by answering those questions. Alrighty, colleagues, see you at 10:25. Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. I hope you've grabbed a cup of tea, you've stretched. Are we back? Can we get thumbs up for those that are back in the meeting room? Seeing thumbs up, people are back, we're back. Are we ready to go again? Alrighty. Okay, so I'm seeing a hand from Sonwabile. Okay, there. Okay, so Nabila, if you have a question, can you please just type it in the Q&A? Can you please just type it in the Q&A? Alrighty, so now we're going to be, thank you for that. I think you're from Inubaya Tem, I just wanted to acknowledge you. Alrighty, so we are going to hand over to NASA so that they can answer some of the questions that were dropped in the Q&A. But before we go into that, just wanted to emphasize there was a question from, let me just find the person's name, from Cornelius. And he said, with the unbundling of ESCOM, are we going to receive separate invoices for transmission network capacity and generator capacity charges? The answer is yes. As we're going into the future, things are going to change. But for now, for next year, nothing has changed. Okay, I hope that is clear. But yeah, I think that's all. Also, just wanted to point out there's been some questions in the chat. All presentations will be shared at the end of the webinar. And then Nick will send out reminders for the remaining webinars that are still to come, tariff training as well as the cost of supply. Okay, but that's it from me from now. I'll hand over to Tabisa and Abase from NERSA to answer the questions. Over to you, colleagues.
Thank you. Tabisa, will you please start?
Thank you, Candace. With regards to the question on whether NERSA will invite municipalities for these workshops on the deforms, yes, that will be done. I think the team is already sending out letters to municipalities, sensitizing them about the dates as presented in the presentation by Abase. And then with regards to will the revised COS framework be implementable for 27, 28 tariff applications? Yes, that is the intention. And that is why we are driving these webinars and workshops that we'll be having so that municipalities, they know that by next year we're using a different methodology, no more cost plus methodology, but only ROR methodology, and all municipalities need to comply with that. And then with regards to the deform workshops, not in Western Cape or Gauteng, I will request, I don't know whether Bill is here or Abase will respond to that. I'm not sure why they are not incorporated
No,
in
it's
the
fine.
list.
I can respond to that one through you, Chair. For the Western Cape, we'll do one-on-one with the municipalities, and also for Gauteng, we'll do one-on-one with municipalities because we are also based here in Gauteng. I thank you.
Okay, thank you, Abase. And then with regards to the written methodology report, be standardized, then or template applicable to all municipalities, or municipalities can use service providers. I think those who can afford service providers, they can use those. But as we have SIA as the organization that has already been assisting us with the development of cost of supply studies. So those who won't be able to afford service providers, I think they can request SIA for assistance. And then the last one, will the RRM workshop be integrated with the deform and cost of supply framework webinars and stakeholder engagement processes? Currently, we won't include RRM workshops, but we'll only concentrate on the deform and cost of supply framework webinars. That will be done at a later stage. The RRM workshops will be done at a later stage because currently they're only considering the metros that are already submitting the RRMs. I think we've responded to all the questions that are on the Q&A, unless there's one that I've missed, or maybe there's further questions that need clarity.
Okay. Let's see, let me check. Okay. Yes, there's just one more question from Chelsea. I think, Megan, you'd like to come in? Yes, you may.
Yes, so I mean, maybe just building on what the regulator said. So Sustainable Energy Africa will, and we'll clarify this at the end, will be running the 5-day online training. We don't have endless capacity, so we're gonna need to try and find sort of more resources to support that. But I think what's really important, and the regulator's trying to stay ahead of the wave here, that let's do it the right way. The model allows us to do that quite easily. I think at the same time, you know, I think this is the point about a regulator, is that they make the rules, but I think there's also they're meant to be reasonable. So where anybody absolutely can't adjust in the time frame, maybe you have absolutely no financial asset register, which is probably unlikely given MSCOA requirements. Then there would be the potential of tiering the transition. So, you know, you could probably write a letter, but you would need to motivate it. So I think let's be sort of agents in the space. Let's be as proactive as possible. Let's get behind the rate of return. And I mean, let's also know that the wires and retail are separate. So the wires business is the rate of return. Your retail business is still on a kind of cost plus method. This will be covered thoroughly. It was covered in the asset story. Nick will go into this a little bit more now. And then again, when we do the COS modeling, we'll be able to go through this. So the model is very adaptable. It's not difficult to bring this into the model. But the regulator is not going to impose on anyone who is absolutely unable to fulfill the requirements. You would then be able to probably motivate a case. I'm saying this not in NERSA's name at all, but as a sort of advisor to the municipalities. So, but we think it can be done. And, you know, it's far better to be ahead of having to resolve this in the courts. As someone said the other day, you know, the courts follow due process. They'll look at the law, they'll look at the regulatory framework, and then they make a decision. They don't necessarily select the right thing. Whereas if you are proactive with the regulator, you can maybe chart that course a little bit more wisely. Thanks.
That was great. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, Tabisa. Thank you so much, Abase, for the inputs and for answering those questions. Colleagues, if you have any more questions, please do type them. Sonabile, we've been waiting for your question. Okay. But yeah, I think there is another poll question that popped up. Please do respond to it. And throughout our next presentation, we will have more polls or vibe checks. So please do just watch out for those. But for now, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Nick. This is the much very awaited presentation that 81% of us in the room said that we are interested in being capacitated to be able to handle. So yeah, I'll just hand over to Nick for that.
Good morning again to everyone. And I'm sorry, I realized I didn't turn on my camera earlier. So I thought I'd just turn it on to prove that I am real and not AI. But as I mentioned, we're now going to be getting into the nuts and bolts of the network side of a cost of supply study. So I'm going to share my screen. And all right. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're now going to be looking at specifically wheeling and embedded generation in the cost of supply tool, and how using the cost of supply tool can help you calculate your network related costs. It's important to stress as well at this point that this isn't only EG and wheeling, but knowing your network related costs is important for many reasons, especially as South Africa does move towards more competition and an electricity market. Municipalities the concept of wheeling will almost fall away, and it will be replaced by multiple suppliers sending their energy through to customers within your network, and you need to be able to bill correctly so that you can maintain your network. And at the end of the day, the network is the king for the municipality. So yeah, it's the crown jewels. It's what needs to be looked after. And as potentially purchases from Eskom decrease, if you are earning your, say, I know the old-fashioned word of earning a surplus on your retail side of your business, as the retail side, so that includes your electricity purchases and some of that OPEX. As that shrinks, your revenue might also. So you need to be making sure that you're recovering your network costs. Okay, so this will look familiar. It's sort of the same concept that we were talking about earlier, except now we're talking about the network and the financial flow of money in a slightly different way. So any wheeling transaction or any embedded generation transaction, or in fact any purchase of electricity, involves two things: the physical flow of energy and the financial flow of money. So the electrons or the kilowatt hours or whatever you like to call it has to flow through the network, and someone has to pay and someone gets paid in an ideal world. But we're going to pretend that this is an ideal world. And so that can mean that there's multiple different stakeholders here. So you can see that Eskom's involved, the municipalities involved, the customers involved, and the generator. There could be multiple generators. And there's just money and electrons flying around all over the place. And it can be quite confusing, but it's just important to remember that what happens physically and what happens financially, they don't follow the same path. So a customer can pay a generator directly for the energy that generator provides, and no money flows through, say, the municipality. However, the municipality's network was used to provide the electricity. Therefore, someone has to pay for that use of the network. And that's what we talk about with the physical flow of energy. Knowing the network side of things is taken care of. So to kind of summarize it, the network will transport the energy no matter who pays for it. Therefore, we need to know our network costs. If there's nothing else you take away from today's session, it's this, is that no matter who's generating the electricity and who's consuming it, if they are using your network to transport that electricity, then you need to be charging them a use of system charge that's fair. Okay. So many of you might have been to some of our wheeling trainings in the past, or some of you have maybe been approached by energy traders and customers who want to wheel electricity, and you might have been concerned about the impact on your revenue. So the concept of the business side of it is something that can be quite intimidating, because you know intuitively that if you aren't selling as many electrons as you used to, that you might be losing out on revenue. So that's where it's important to bed down the concept of these network costs and these retail costs. So just to recap, like we said in my first session, The revenue requirement is made up of all the allowable network and retail costs. So the network costs is your capex, your depreciation. The retail costs would be your Eskom bulk purchases, other energy purchases, billing and metering. So if your bulk purchases reduce, then the retail side of your costs will also reduce. However, your network costs will remain the same, provided that the same amount of energy is flowing through the network. So this is all a lot of words, but here's a picture that I find explains it a bit better. In this situation here, freewheeling or embedded generation, think about, say, electricity in the early 2000s. You sold a certain amount of energy, and most of it, or majority of it, was the retail side, because you were buying everything from Eskom, but you still had your network costs. So your retail costs here and your network costs here, and together stacked up, they made your total revenue requirement. Now, in the new world, you might not be buying as much energy as you used to. However, your network costs haven't reduced at the same rate. They, in fact, might have increased depending on your unique situation. So this green bit here mustn't shrink, even though this blue bit will shrink. Your network costs remain the same, your retail costs will go down. So while your total revenue requirement may be different when you suddenly have wheeling and exports tariffs, when there's just different non-Eskom energy in the system, your network still needs to be maintained and upgraded and looked after and managed, so these network costs don't go away. So this is a very important concept to remember, that hiding behind this revenue requirement, as we say in the cost of supply world, you uncover your cost drivers. Hiding behind this is your network costs, and they don't change just because someone else is supplying the energy. So now that we've got that basic concept, I'm going to look quickly at the embedded generation costs. These are a bit more intuitive than the wheeling side of things. So we'll start with the embedded generation. So in the cost of supply tool, there's a very useful tab that probably doesn't get looked at as much as it should. But if you go to the cost of supply results year 2 in the tool, and you'll see that there's a few different tables, but there's one called the cost reflective charges, and it's broken down by business area, class, season, and time of use period for each customer category. When you look at these results, you'll be able to see what the costs are for example, for the energy, the demand, and the customer related costs for the high season, for the low season, and for off-peak, standard, and peak time. So you can then see, all right, based on my my municipality's cost of supply study, the network side, this WISE side here, has energy costs of such and such for high season and low season for off-peak, standard, and peak. It's got demand costs in a rand per kVA per month breakdown, and the customer related costs in a rand per pod, or you could think of that as a rand per customer per month sort of charge. So you can then see for the different seasons and times of use what it costs you to for the network side. And that's where embedded generation tariff design will start. And I'm not going to go into tariff design today because we are going to be doing a whole tariff design workshop next week, Thursday. And I would encourage everyone to share that far and wide because it's quite an important one. And I think it's going to be very valuable now that stakeholder engagement and public cost of supplies are the commonality now. So I'm not going to go into the tariff design, as I said, but it's good to know for an embedded generation export tariff that if someone's exporting solar at midday on a sunny day, that's in off-peak time, and your network costs are different to if they are exporting at peak time. So you wouldn't want to have a flat export tariff where you are maybe over rewarding a customer for exporting at a time when energy is cheap, and on the flip side, maybe punishing yourself at peak time when you would prefer them to be exporting. So designing export tariffs according to time of use is one way to get the best out of something like an export tariff. You can also see, if you don't want to look at just the high and low season off-peak standard, you can look at your costs per customer category. So you can see here, I've just picked 3 for your customer category, what it costs across all seasons and all times of use for energy demand and customer related costs. And that can maybe give you a more aggregated view of what the network side of maintaining the business is. So this cost of supply results year 2 is very useful for as a starting point for designing an export tariff. And just on that as well, we probably won't have too much time in the tariff design session to go into export tariffs specifically, but we're going to be making a separate video on that and a little user guide for municipalities to look specifically at export tariffs. So that will be part of the resources from this project. So don't worry if it's not clear. There will be a whole special resource pack on this. And also to mention, there is already a lot out there on the SSEG website on how to design export tariffs. So you could even start right now looking through some of those documents and getting to grips with it. Then something that can be considered a bit more difficult to understand is the idea of wheeling. So wheeling is one of those things where there's physical flows and financial flows, and the weird interplay between them can sometimes scramble your head a little bit. So don't worry, we also have done wheeling trainings in the past, and there's videos, resources, revenue impact guides, all sorts of things that are on our website and on YouTube, and that can really help you understand wheeling. So I won't be able to do a full wheeling training now. We did a 3-day wheeling training with NECOM last year, and even at the end of the 3 days, we felt like we wished we had more time. So this is more the concept of understanding your network costs rather than wheeling specifically, because wheeling might not survive the new electricity market, in which case it'll get a new name, but the concept will remain the same. So just to introduce wheeling, there's 2 different kinds of wheeling scenarios, as they're known. There's one where the generator that's supplying the energy is connected on the Eskom network, and this is called a type A wheeling scenario. So that means the energy gets sent to Eskom. Eskom then sells it to the municipality and then credits the municipality for the energy that Eskom itself didn't produce. And then that goes to the end customer. In a type B situation, that's where the generator is connected within the municipal network. So Eskom is not involved at all. The generator sends the energy through the municipal network to the end customer. So type B and type A have different financial flows, and that's something to be aware of. Okay, so before you can start using the cost of supply tool, you need to establish the base data, as I've called it, before you can put it into the model. So you need to first look at the different wheeling scenarios. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, is it an Eskom connected generator or is it a municipal connected generator? Once you've done that, you need to look at the type of energy that you're expecting to flow through your network, and that will involve the different customers and everything. Once you've done that, and I'll explain how to do that in the upcoming slides, then you can take that information and put it into the cost of supply model, and that is where you can then start looking at your use of system charges. So step one is you need to first look at your customers and identify whether it's going to be a type A or a type B. So is the energy coming from an Eskom connected generator where Eskom will then bill you for all the energy and then credit you for the wheeled energy? Or is it within your own network? Once you've figured that out, you can then estimate the volume of the wheeled energy for each customer. At this point, it's important to note that in most cases, your customer, your off-taker, won't be consuming only wheeled energy. It's going to be a mix of energy that is supplied by the municipality and energy that's supplied by the IPP. So throughout the discussion, we're only referring to the wheeled portion of the energy. So the energy that was, say, generated by the solar farm and then wheeled to that customer. So when we say we're looking at the volumes, we're looking at only the wheeled portion. So if you know how much a customer has agreed to purchase based on, say, a PPA, then you can use that actual data in your forecasting. If you don't know exactly, you can estimate the amount of energy that they'll consume. Sorry. Oh yeah. So once you've done that, you can then forecast that. So you might have 1 year's worth of estimated energy volumes, but then you need to look at, is that going to grow in the next few years? And if you've got the forecasted actual data, then that's first prize. If not, you can use a percentage year-on-year growth. You then also need to estimate the losses and the total supply requirements. So based on the customer's load profile, they might have a different loss factor. So you need to factor in losses according to the season and the time of use to try and figure out the total energy requirements that will be required by the customer. So, and I know this is a bit small, I hope everyone can see it, but when we share the slides, you'll be able to read it. If you don't know the loss factor and you aren't sure, there's the tab Technical Forecasts Year 2. You can look at the customer categories there. So let's say it's an industrial customer that's going to be wheeling. You can look for the loss factor of the industrial customers in the cost of supply tool and use that as an estimate for the loss factor of this type of customer. Also, if you don't know what their consumption will be in terms of the split across the seasonal and the time of use, in the power purchase input summary sheet, there's a breakdown of typical seasonal and time of usage. So throughout the year, maybe 11% of consumption will take place at peak time in the high season. So these are things that can help you figure out the splits here. And this is where, remember, you're doing all of this outside the model still. And once you've calculated that, you can then put it into the model. At this point, I just want to mention as well, if you're lost, don't worry. I'm going to show you how you can do this in a step-by-step a little bit later. These are just the concepts that I'm discussing now. Once you've done that, you would now start to use the cost of supply tool itself. So the first step for those of you that have worked with the cost of supply tool as well is you need to go to the index tables. So there are a few things you'd need to change in order to get your wheeling customers sorted out. So you could go to this index of customer categories over here, and then you can create your new customer categories. I've made type A and type B wheeling. Depending on the voltage level or the type of customer that's wheeling, you might have multiple type A wheeling customers. So you could have type A domestic, type A industrial, and you can then say what kind of assets or intake point that they'll be taking it at. Then you would need to say that you will be doing time of use tariffs, because it's very important for wheeling use of system charges to have it according to time of use for reasons we've already discussed. Then over here, there's some services provided include both wheeling and retail. In this case, we have to make it false, because we aren't providing retail services, we're only providing wheeling services. And then over here, you need to say what kind of customer group is most similar to this new type of customer. And then also here, is it a new category in year 0? And if it is, because you're only starting wheeling, say next year, then you would say true. If you already are wheeling, so you've got wheeling customers already, then this would go as false. So then the next step in the cost of supply tool itself is you need to update the commercial and the technical inputs. So in the commercial inputs, that's where you would put your forecasted sales and forecasted customer numbers. So those calculations that we did outside the model in steps 1 and 2, this is where you now input that sort of information. Then as well, in the technical inputs, years 1 to 4, that's where you put the load profile and the loss factor inputs that we also calculated. If for some reason you want to use, say, a percentage forecast or an actual forecast, if you go to the methodology inputs in the selected approach to electricity sales forecasting and the selected approach to customer sales forecasting, you can change that from option 1 to option 2. So you could either say we expect sales to grow by 5%, or you can put in an actual megawatt or kilowatt hour hard-coded value, whichever suits your municipality. Okay, so now this is where you need to pull out a formation depending on whether the customer is getting electricity from an Eskom connected generator or from a municipal connected generator. So in the case of an Eskom connected generator here, what Eskom does when they bill you as a municipality is they will charge you for all the energy that you as the municipality purchase, and they will then credit you at a rate known as the WEPS rate, the wholesale electricity pricing system rate, for the wheeled energy. They include, or they exclude, losses and a portion of the generation capacity charge in that WEPS rate. So you can see here, these are our current year's WEPS rates. So if you have wheeling already in your municipality, you'll know that it's a separate page on your Eskom invoice where they show you the wheeled quantity, and then they multiply that by the WEPS rate, and that's where they get your WEPS credit. So just to kind of step you through that again, the WEPS credit amount is the energy wheeled multiplied by the WEPS rate, and that's what is subtracted from your bill. That's why it's a credit. They do that according to peak, standard, and off-peak times. So as I mentioned earlier, that's why it's important to know your time of use costs, because Eskom charges you a different rate at off-peak, standard, and peak. So you need to be able to mirror that. Once you've figured that out, you need to calculate the total WEPS amount for the year, and you put that into your financial inputs. If you are already wheeling, you put in financial inputs year 0. If you're only planning to start wheeling next year, you'll input that amount, that WEPS credit, into your financial inputs years 1 to 4 only. You must, and I'll show you this a bit later, but you must create a new item on your index your financial inputs called your wheeling credits or your WEPS credits under the non-electricity supply revenues. The reason why it's in revenues is because it's a credit, so it's kind of seen as money that the municipality receives rather than spends, which makes sense because Eskom's reducing your bill by that amount. It should also be allocated as 100% retail, and the function should be OPEX. And I'll show you how that looks in the tool in a second. This is just a quick sidebar to go through the WEPS system a bit more. But as I said, it's essentially the purchase price of the energy that Eskom sells you. So when Eskom bills you on Munich Flex, they charge you for the energy, but they also charge you transmission network charges, there's demand charges, there's generation capacity, there's all sorts of different charges that they give you, but they still charge you their network costs. The only thing that they're crediting you is the energy portion. So they've essentially done what we're talking about today. They've figured out what their network costs are, and they make sure that they charge you those. The only thing that they are not charging you for is the energy. So that's the sort of concept that you need to then apply to your customers. And you can see here, this, let's just say this is your Munich Flex cost over here, or like, let's say this is your retail tariff. If you only charged wheeling customers the network costs, that would be called a use of system charge, but you can charge them the normal rate and then credit them for the energy portion, and that's known as the WEPS credit method, and that's what Eskom does to you, and that's what some municipalities also do for their wheeling charges. So back to the model, as I was saying a few slides ago, when you go to the financial inputs year 0 to the non-electricity supply revenues, you put in your WEPS credit as another revenue. You put in the amount if you already are wheeling in the year 0. If you're not wheeling already, you can leave that blank because you're only planning to start wheeling next year. You then say it's 100% retail. So those credits have nothing to do with your network. It's all a retail function of the business, so you make it 100% retail, and then you allocate the function to OPEX. In the financial inputs, years 1 to 4, this is now forecasting your sales into the future. You go into your non-electricity supply revenues, and you then you figure out what you expect those WEPS credits to be in the future based on the calculations that you did before getting into the model. You then forecast that through to year 1, year 2, year 3, and year 4. And as you get closer, you can update those estimates. So let's say you forecasted year 4 was going to be much lower than it actually ends up being. You can update that in your cost of supply studies as the years roll by. If you are now dealing with a municipal connected generator, you treat this sort of scenario differently in the cost of supply tool. So what you do, because now this is important, is you're not paying Eskom the full amount and then getting a credit. Eskom's not involved at all. The only thing that happens between you and Eskom is that your bill reduces because you are getting electricity supplied from someone else inside the network. But you still have the energy, the electrons are still flowing through your network at the same rate. So what you do here is you put those kilowatt hours that you're expecting to be generated within your network from say an IPP, you put them in this category other. So, and you can forecast those forward. So what this achieves is it still shows the flow of energy on the network, but very importantly, it's at a zero cost. It's not, you're not paying for it at all. In fact, your customer is paying the generator directly. So you're not spending any municipal money on the energy. You're only spending money on the network side of it. So the way I typed it probably explains it better. The municipality doesn't pay for the wheeled energy. The customer pays for it. The municipality only transports the energy through the network. Therefore, there's zero energy costs, but the network costs still need to be calculated. So now, I'm sure you're all feeling like this guy. Wheeling can be quite confusing, and it's natural to feel a little bit confused by these things. If I haven't done it for a while, I even need to do a bit of a refresher. But rest assured that there's a lot of resources to help explain all of this, and we will be sharing all of those. And as I mentioned, we will be doing a dedicated video that will cover each of these concepts in a bit more detail. The intention of this session was more to show you that the tool is equipped to help you with your wheeling and embedded generation needs. And in fact, a lot of thought has gone into developing that. So you might also be thinking, if you're a pragmatic person, this is all well and good, but at the end of the day, if I need a use of system charge, can it give me that? And the answer is yes. So you can look at the network related costs in isolation and use that as a starting point for a use of system charge or for an export tariff. And so you can see here that on the tab, the tariff schedule, year 2, there's a little toggle at the top here that you might not ever have paid attention to before, but it gives you 3 options. It gives you wires and retail, wires only, and retail only. And basically what it does is that once you've designed your tariffs in the rate design tab, so it's the tab that precedes this tariff schedule tab, you can then see how your tariffs are allocated to each customer category according to the different cost drivers, the customer related costs, the demand related costs, and then the energy related costs. You can split that by high and low season and by off-peak, standard, and peak time. You also don't have to split them seasonally or according to time of use. You don't even have to charge a demand or a basic charge. It shows you whatever you design. And we're going to go through how to do that next week in the tariff the tariff training workshop. So this is a bit of a teaser. But basically, you will use your cost of supply results to inform your tariff design. And once you've done that, you toggle this to wires only. And what you will see is the network related costs. So you can see in my example, it's a bit of a silly example, so don't worry about the demand charge being so high, but you'll see now that the basic charge is 14 Rand per month, where it used to be 71. So my network costs are relatively, or have a relatively small proportion of the overall basic charge, but there is still a customer related cost there. I can see my demand charges, and then I can see my variable charges. Some people might be wondering why in a network only charge, why should there be a cents per kilowatt hour charge there? That's down to your setup, because losses are considered part of the network related costs and part of the retail related costs. So those energy losses are factored in to your wires only charge. So when you charge your customer for a use of system charge, you need to decide whether you're going to include or exclude losses. And based on that, you can change that setup in the tool. But in this example, I've still got those losses built into my network only charge. So all of this to say is that the current tool as it is does allow you to look at your network costs and allows you to design tariffs based only on your network costs, which is essentially what a use of system or an export tariff is. And we'll go into that next week in a bit more detail. And WSP, the developers of this tool, are going to be improving the user guide with a big focus on the wires and retail splits and how you can use it as a municipality for your use of system charges. So for now, I think my main objective was to show you that the tool does have the ability to do all of this, and it's going to take a few repetitions to make sure that it's easy to understand. So don't expect it to sink in straight away. And I hope that throughout the next few months, as we get the cost of supply studies rolling, starting with our cost of supply workshop in September, that's a week long, we'll be taking you through the beginning to end of how to do a cost of supply study. At that point, you will then be able to play with the wires and retail features of the cost of supply tool using your own data so that you can understand your network costs more intimately. And ultimately, that will help you design your use of system charges. It's also very important to note that without having policies and council approved guidelines in place, these use of system charges are still going to cause you headaches, even if you've calculated them correctly. So it's a two-pronged approach. You need to understand your costs and your cost drivers, but you also need to make sure that everything is done according to proper municipal guidelines, frameworks, and that's something that you can get working on right away, even though you don't have the cost of supply study yet. So that's just my little soapbox moment, that the tariff itself is not enough. You need to have the legal backing as well if you want to avoid being in the courtroom next year. So with that, I'll end my presentation. I hope it wasn't too confusing. We will share all of this with you, and I'll hand over back to my colleague Candice.
Wow, thank you so much, Nick, for that presentation. I think that was really great. Um, Let me just check the Q&A. Nick, I'm not sure if you'd like to answer any of the other questions, but I thought that was a really great presentation. For those of you who mentioned earlier on in the call that this is one of the main things that you would like to have knowledge on. So I think besides being like Zach Galifianakis, Nick, I think from Embedded Generation, the main point that you mentioned was that we need to use our COS results sheet within the tool as a basis for our export tariff design. So I got that one. And then for wheeling, you identified, I think it was 3 main steps. The first one, we need to identify our wheeling scenario. Is it within our network or outside the boundary? The second one was to estimate what the sales will be in the future, as well as our losses and our load or our energy requirements. And then you even gave us tips on how to go about it if we don't know how to identify it. And then lastly, you said we need to create new customer categories in the index table. And then from there, we identify whether it's an ESCOM connected generator or a municipal connected generator. And then you gave us a teaser on how to design our use of system charges. But then you said you will get into it into the webinar in the next week. So thank you so much for that. Alrighty. So that was Nick with the how to input embedded generation and wheeling into the tool. So now we're going to be moving on to ring fencing. So with this one, I think I would like to hand over to my colleague, Megan. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you so much, Candice. And just to say to people on the call, this is going to be quite an informal session, and it's going to be our closing session. Candice, do we want to run any of the polls? Are people aware of them in the chat, and are they running through them in the chat? So what we're hoping to do with the polls is to get your kind of get a status quo of whether people have got use of system charges. Are they, are these something people are using, and so on. So please note those in the chat. And most of the polls, I think, are still live, or some are closed. If you've missed them,
I can reopen them,
something,
yes.
we can, okay, Candice will reopen them. So we're not sort of giving you immediate feedback on them, but I think it's really important for us to have a sense of, and particularly as we go into designing the cost of supply model training, it's useful for us to know where people are at with this. So let me just we recap. We left the space station, shall we say, and we went out into the future world. And I think there is the immediate future, and we had the regulator speaking to that. So it's really requiring us to begin to separate out the wires in retail, which is not really a problem. The tool already does that. So in fact, if you've been using the COS model, you've all been separating wheels, wires and retail already. And then Nick gave us that wonderfully complex looking slide, which shows exactly which costs go down to the wires and the retail. And the really great news is like, wow, you're already doing that. So your wires and retail is essentially already separated. And Candice in the very beginning told us why that is so critical. And one of the reasons is, if you are a struggling municipality and you might be engaging in a DAA, or into the future, you might decide to separate off your retail business. It means your assets are protected. And that rate of return methodology that the regulator is now introducing as a requirement, linked back to the era, really highlights just how valuable your assets are. And I think once your municipality becomes aware that the money they're able to sort of make off the business is no longer through the wholesale passing through, but through maintenance of those assets, and getting a return on that asset base, I think that really changes how we manage our assets. So that's fantastic. And then obviously the next big part that's come down through the regulation is this promotion of A, competition, and B, renewable energy. So in Schedule 2 of the ERA, we have the lifting of the cap on renewable energy. And those two things start to bring complexity into the cost of supply. In the immediate cost of supply that you're going to be submitting next year, that complexity is not more than just making sure that you've got your embedded generation and your wheeling integrated. NERSA has adapted the deforms. They're going to, in the roadshow, explain exactly how that works. So you are going to now be required to start listing your embedded generation that you're getting into the municipality as exported generation and wheeling. So those are two new reporting requirements. The embedded generation is made a whole lot easier if you do have a digital online platform. So some sort of digitization of that data, because particularly in the big metros, but even the small ones, you've got lots and lots of small embedded generators who are putting electricity into your grid, from whom you're getting electricity and on selling that electricity. And to do that manually is going to be more and more difficult. So these are the important backgrounds. And I think Candice was really on target when she said, you also have to do this. You are also, you know, legislated organizations. You have to do this against policy that your council has approved. So on the one hand, you've got the regulator requiring through their rules that you have certain of these things in place, but you've also got council needing to establish the policy framework. So you do need to go back to the basics. I think it's important to just highlight, I'm referring a little bit to Gary Ross's comment in the chat. We're dealing with the, you know, the very next cost of supply, but all of these changes are really first steps on an ongoing process of transition. I'm afraid there's no, what did they say? There's no rest for the wicked. So what we're doing now is kind of like the embryonic version of like, what are we going to have to do when we are in an unregulated market? So when there's a full sort of market competition, and what we're going to see then is not just your kind of fixed charges from Eskom and your energy charges, but you're going to get invoices from the transmission system operator. You're going to get capacity charges. You're going to get ancillary charges. You're going to get all sorts of things, and those charges are also going to relate to your customers differently, depending on whether your customers are engaged in the market or just captive customers, whether they're embedded generators. So matching of all of those different services to your customers, which Nick took us through with wheeling, is going to get more and more complex. So let's, you know, getting on top of this now, understanding the basics that you've got to start building your tariff from the bottom up, that ultimately you can't use a kind of a sort of just a kind of using the Eskom tariff as a benchmark and then subtracting certain costs from that. You're going to actually have to sort of build it from the bottom up as we move into the future. So understanding all of this is critical. Now, what we're closing with is a slightly different element of future-proofing your cost of supply study. And this element is more linked to the fact that municipal licensees are embedded inside of municipalities. And our metros are currently engaged in the Metro Trading Services program. I think it's been an incredibly useful program. We also have heard from some of the metros that, in fact, the cost of supply work has also been a critical input into that program, into the readiness for that program. And we know from Treasury that it's starting with the metros, but the intention is to expand that program over time to other municipalities, presumably starting with secondary and moving on. But all of what it represents is essentially good practice that we can start engaging with anyway. And one of the core things is that as you bring cost reflectivity into pricing, Tabisa and Nkopo from the regulator spoke about the law saying that you need to be able to recover your efficient costs. But underpinning that is a sense of the utility being a ring-fenced entity. You are enabled through legislation sitting within National Treasury, so within the MFMA and the MSA, to put taxes or surcharges onto your electricity. But that needs to be very transparent, and money that you do bring in through the tariffs needs to be, apart from those surcharges, needs to be ring-fenced and held within the utility. There needs to be a guarantee that money that is coming into refurbished networks is in fact being spent on networks. So in this last session, we had hoped to get a metro to formally present into the session, but we're actually going to do it on a more informal basis. What we'd really like is to call on the metros in the room. So I think we did see we've got City Power. I'm not sure whether Msunduzi is participating in this Metro Trading Services. I think France from Ekurhuleni had to step out, but we have got Gary Roche from the City of Cape Town. And I think eThekwini, I think I saw Siatembo Lutuli on the call. If any of you have got anything that you could share with the other municipalities in the call around ring fencing, around any sort of useful tips. What has ring fencing meant to your metro? How has it been a challenging thing to implement? We'd love to hear that from you now. So this is putting you on the spot. Candice did warn you, but if there's any one of you who'd like to step into the space and say something about ring fencing of the utility, we'd really welcome. What we'd invite is if you put your hand up, we can then specifically unmute you. This is asking them to speak off the cuff. Gary, I've got you here because you put the last comment into the chat. So is there anything the City of Cape Town can share around the process of ring fencing? Thanks, Gary. Let me just unmute you. Then you will be able to come in. Thanks.
Hi there.
There we go. Hi, Gary.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
With
That
my
sounds
headset.
great.
Yeah, I think Cape Town's perspective, fencing is something that's been around for we were the first municipality to embark on the distributor process.
Okay, Gary, your sound is not that clear. I'm not sure why.
Okay, just give me 30 seconds.
We'll give you a second. While you're doing that, I think there's an important comment from Cornelius around NERSA forcing ring fencing, they're providing a ring fencing framework. Okay, so Cornelius, I don't know the detail of that, and we'll certainly see if NERSA wants to respond, but otherwise I think that's a really useful thing to raise. So if maybe that's something that can come out of the Metro Trading Service process is a ring fencing framework. Gary, yes. Are you here with us?
Am I louder now?
You sound perfect now, loud and smooth.
No, my one set of headphones don't always work properly, so I have a backup. As I was saying, we were part of the original RED process. When was that? Early 2000s, I think. At which point, financially at least, we were somewhat ring-fenced out of the business of the general city of Cape Town. So for us, it's kind of been business as usual for a long time. But yeah, they are, with the Metro Trading Services, reform program, also pushing for ring fencing and so on. There are still some areas where we are working on, things like separate financial documents that are completely separate. We obviously have certain functions which are done by our corporate divisions. So things like IT, it just makes sense to have one body throughout the city that deals with that. But we are in the process of putting service delivery agreements in place as part of the Metro Trading Services work with all these divisions, which will in many ways have ring-fenced costs and so on, and hopefully ensure value for money on that. But yeah, generally, while we're not operating as an entity, we have for a long time operated as a largely independent directorate, let's call it that, within the city. We do have what we call sector accounts. So water and electricity's money is kept separate, and it is all tracked. So yeah,
Great.
I don't know how helpful it is, but we've certainly, a move to full ring fencing isn't that hard for us, because it's something that we've just had in place for years. So yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. So what I'm hearing is City of Cape Town had a particular advantage because of the REDS process, where they went through this thorough kind of pulling out of and detailing of assets, etc. But I think what you noted, which is useful for everybody. So I mean, obviously there's that extracting all the financials, but a very useful one was the service delivery agreement. So obviously you're part of a bigger system. Your IT, your HR, your SAP system all sits with the municipality as a whole. And what Gary's pointed to is that you actually start to formalize that through service delivery agreements down the line. I mean, in the interim, what you want to start doing is really know what the real costs of that is. And in actual fact, many municipalities on this call probably don't even bring into their cost of supply the real costs that they do actually owe to the municipality for the services that the corporate service part of the municipality brings into them. So on the one hand, there's the ring fencing of tariff revenue that is meant to stay within the utility to refurbish the utility. On the other hand, there is the identifying and ring fencing to some extent the costs that you actually do legitimate and, as Gary pointed to, hopefully efficient costs that you then owe the municipality. And many municipalities are not even paying their legitimate contribution to the municipality. So ideally that would be governed through service delivery agreements. So I hope that makes sense. And maybe we can just see whether there isn't, so I don't know whether somebody from City Power, I see there's a couple in the room. There's also Siatemba, maybe from eThekwini, maybe just to hear from one of the other big metros who didn't undergo a RED process. How onerous has this been, or has it been a relatively easy process? Are there any kind of key lessons learned or hints for other municipalities in terms of setting this up financially? See if there's a daring person who puts up their hand. And I mean, I think we're asking the metros because of the trading services, but if there's any other municipality in the room who'd like to share something on ring fencing, please also put your hand up. Nobody from City Power. Kulekani, somebody. Okay. if that's the case and no one is keen to share anything here, then let's just consolidate by saying that what you're looking at is creating a utility that is a standalone business. That utility must, in a sense, pay their way. So if they are renting a building from the municipality, they must pay rental for that. They must pay the fair portion of their usage of other corporate services such as IT, HR, the billing system, and so on. At the same time, when revenue comes in, that revenue critically must stay within the municipality. And there's a whole set of accounting exercises that need to be done there. And then there are also a set of actually developing formalized service delivery agreements with the corporate services involved. So thanks, Gary, for that outline. I see Nick is putting up his hand, but otherwise I wanted to just, I'm going to close and then let Nick speak, and just to say to Cornelius, thank you for your comment. And I think that that is something we can certainly pull into the kind of roadmap of work that needs to be done going forward. Nick, yes.
Thanks, Megan. Sorry, this is maybe a little bit off topic a bit, but I was interested to hear, I see Gary did respond in the chat, but his comment on the export tariffs of the future might just be interesting to hear that elaborated on a little bit.
Gary, would you like to respond to that?
Okay. Personal bugbear. Yeah. Well, there's two aspects to the feed-in tariffs that I think are areas we need to, as an industry, we actually need to have a long, hard look at. Yeah. The first one, and maybe it's the one that I spoke to, they're kind of related. So, you know, if you're going to put a time of use feed-in tariff into place, and this is all against the backdrop of City of Cape Town actually having such a tariff, the problem comes in that in time, if you now have to undo that, you now create a lot of customer impact.
Yeah.
And it actually then becomes very difficult to undo what you have already done. So for those that maybe don't have such a tariff, I would think long and hard before going time of use route. With time of use to me is a demand side management tool. If you've got a constrained system, then you use it. If not, then it shouldn't be a basic, and this even goes for consumption tariffs. It shouldn't be a first stop in terms of where you design your tariffs. And simply because a lump of coal does not care what time of day you burn it. So your user system, your network is there, your cables are there. It doesn't really care what time of day you use it. It cares how much of it you use. So, and if your network is not constrained in any way, then your time of use is not actually going to be of much benefit other than punishing a customer. Now, we are sitting in an environment where we do have constrained networks, and there are those kind of things. So there is some merit in them. But I think maybe this is a topic that can be explored more in the tariff design workshop. But yeah, and the second part is we've long set our feed-in tariffs as an Eskom offset price. I don't believe that to be the correct methodology either. It should be the cost of generation. What you have now is if you set it as an Eskom offset, you're actually overpaying for that energy, because PV energy has a capital cost, but it has a lifespan and a generation capacity, and there is a generation tariff in reality for even residential SSEG stuff. And that is the price we should be paying for that energy. So yeah, it's quite a complicated setup. And I mean, I don't think we've made life easy for ourselves. Load shedding has a lot to answer for in terms of structures and tariffs that we put in place, because there was a time and a place where these things were actually valid. But as we move forward and as we move into a freer environment, I think these are all conversations we're going to have as an industry as a whole, as to whether or not the way we've done things until now and the way we are still doing things actually hold merit still. And I think it's more a conversation. My comments are more for those who have yet to implement anything, to actually think long and hard about where the future is, what is actually valid in terms of going forward, so that you don't find yourself having to undo what you've just done, because that doesn't sit well with the customer base. And yeah,
Okay, thanks, Gary.
As Cape Town's been down this road, how we're going to undo what we've already done, that's something we're going to have some serious discussions with the mayor and others about in time. So yeah, it's just maybe a word of caution for others who haven't gone down this line. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, so I mean, I think there are two things there. I think the one is that certainly our SSEG group can have a look at that and maybe even think about putting out some advice on that. I think the other thing is that there's a lot of work around what's going to happen in the sort of new market and the new pricing interfaces, and there's going to be quite a big at the moment we talk about the embedded gen tariff for export, but I think there's going to be huge differentiation between bigger players and smaller players, and there might be different sets of rules applied, and so it's going to be a big work in progress. So noted. And those moving forward who don't have one, let's see if we can do some more nuanced advice around that if they need to get one in place urgently. So we can certainly look at that. Thank you, Gary, and thank you for speaking into the space on ring fencing. Cape Town is a little unusual, but I think the general discussion is very useful. So please, to people as you are moving into the space, and I think something Candice also mentioned at the very beginning, and I'm going to say it one more time before I hand over to her, is that it's not just about producing a cost of supply for compliance. It's really around deepening this cost of supply for greater scrutiny. And part of that is, if you're charging for refurbishment, the regulators are right to see, as does the customer, are you spending that money on refurbishment? Because if that money is actually just draining out somewhere else, then that's not a legitimate cost to put to us as customers. So this idea of ring fencing, I think, is critical in terms of defending your cost of supply. And it's both, as I said, in terms of making sure you keep the money in the utility, but also making sure that you, in fact, bill customers correctly for the real cost of running a retail and distribution utility. So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand over to Candice to bring us back to the docking station, I think is the term.
Thank you so much for that, Megan. That was really great. Thank you for your inputs, Gary. Yes, and I think, Megan, when you were leading into your session, you provided really great summary notes of the session, and we are now landing the spacecraft. We have arrived at our destination, and hopefully through the session we have been able to ease some of your anxiety about the future. Hopefully. Yeah, but now remember, we were looking out onto the grid and there was a lot of things coming out at us, but now we have laid them out beautifully and hopefully have a clearer picture of what to expect and how to navigate it. But before we close off, just reminders about the upcoming webinars. If you have not registered for these webinars, can you please just drop your email in the chat and we will send it out. But then reminders will be going out. So the next webinar will be next week, Thursday, the 27th of August, and it will be the tariff design training, and Nick will be leading that one. And then we have the 5-day training on the cost of supply study model completion, and that's running from the 7th to the 11th of September. And then yes, thank you so much, co-captain, co-pilot. We are now doing a post-webinar survey. So now, can everyone that is still left on the call please just provide answers to the survey? There's about how many people left? 90 people. Can we please just get as many as possible so that we know that the webinar was impactful? And then I'm seeing a hand from Denver. Nick, should we? Yes, alrighty. Let's just make you a presenter. Yes, you can come in, Denver. I'm not sure if you are speaking. You are muted, but I cannot hear anything. Or maybe you wanted to react. You can type in the chat. Okay. There's a comment from Megan saying, please note that C and NERSA will ensure that the timing works so that people can be in the model training and at the NERSA Roadshow workshops. Yes. And then also, I think Nick mentioned in his presentation that there will be a user guide. WSP is working on an updated user guide for the tool, and that will be shared once it is finalized. Okay. Let's just check on the post-webinar survey. Are people responding to the poll? So the first question is, do you know how to separate your wires and your retail costs? Now that Nick has given us that presentation, do we know how to navigate that? And the last question is, do you now know how to integrate wheeling into your cost of supply study? And if it is still quite confusing, as Nick mentioned, this session is being recorded and you can play it back. Repetition is the mother of learning, so just get it in and practice will make perfect. But then also the user guide will provide further insights into it. And then for user system charges, he will cover it in his training. So it's just those two questions and then we can close. But yeah, thank you so much to everyone for availing themselves. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come and attend the webinar. Thank you so much to NERSA for the inputs and the presentations. For the presentations that were shared today will be sent to everyone that was in attendance. Okay, colleagues, I hope I'm not forgetting anything. Okay, thumbs up.
And just one last thing, just to say that George Lotter was asking, would we take people through that spreadsheet for wheeling in the model training? And I said, yes, we will. We'll try and append it as a session that's specifically dedicated to those with wheeling, so that not everyone sits through it unnecessarily. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And to my co-pilot Zibu, please also launch the last one. I'm not sure if you are going to do that as well.
Please come again, Candice.
I'm saying we can launch the last poll.
Okay, and the one that's live is the last one. So we are
already. Okay. Okay, so if you have answered the poll, you are free to leave the spacecraft. We will see you at the next webinar next week, Thursday. Thank you, everyone.